I can't believe I'm sitting here a couple of days before the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I went back to Final Fantasy VII Remake 2024 to play it, get reacquainted with the characters, play it on hard mode to discover what the combat system is truly all about. And while I only got to Chapter 8, there was a lot of people on my Final Fantasy XVI review, which is a game I didn't really like too much, that said the Final Fantasy VII Remake has a lot of the same issues as 16, so that's also something I wanted to look into. It's a special time in the industry when a new Final Fantasy game comes out because, let's be honest, it's one of the most divisive series on the planet. Every single game some people love, other people hate, and there's never really a universally loved Final Fantasy game because even the highest rated ones like Final Fantasy VII Remake has its detractors, and that's fine. So going back to April 2020, there was something going on in the world, if you remember it. And back then, I bought most of my games physically, but this game I decided to buy digitally because, and this was the reason why now I buy a lot of games digitally, is that the world just kind of got messed up. Deliveries were lost, GameStop didn't get stock in, there was just so many issues, and this was one of the first big games that I specifically bought digitally instead of getting physically. And back then, it just couldn't have come out at a better time, let's be honest. Like, the whole world had stopped, everybody was off work. I just started my YouTube channel. I just played Final Fantasy VII and then I went straight into Final Fantasy VII Remake. And remaking Final Fantasy VII was an absolutely massive task. This game was all over the place. It was originally thought to be coming out on the PS3 when they showed some weird tech demo at E3. And then the remake got officially announced in 2015. It was given to one studio, I think they were called CyberConnect. And then it got taken off them, it got taken in-house. And it was just an absolute disaster. Like, let's be honest. If you're thinking about Square, pre-Final Fantasy VII Remake Square, you're thinking, oh, this isn't going to be good. And since this is Final Fantasy VII, like, this is one of the most influential and most monumental games in the history of video games, and you're sitting there thinking, they're just not going to be able to do this well. You hear the stories of how Nomura didn't even realize he was going to direct the game, and you're just, oh my god, this game is going to be absolutely awful. And then it came out, and this game is an absolute triumph in everything. Firstly, the music is sensational. When I re-downloaded this game, I didn't play it the day I downloaded it, and I turned it on my PlayStation and just listened to the music while cooking. Because the music in this game is absolutely off the charts. It's some of the best music in gaming ever. Final Fantasy, obviously, world famous series for its music, and I think it's best in Final Fantasy VII. But I also have to give Final Fantasy X its flowers because the soundtrack in that game is absolutely fantastic. This game feels nostalgic, and here's a question for people who have never played Final Fantasy VII, the original one, or never grew up with Final Fantasy. Is this game nostalgic to you? Because it feels like a game that is nostalgic regardless of if you actually have any nostalgia about it. So the music is just fantastic. And then you get into the characters, and this game is extremely campy. And I didn't realize this back then, but I realize it now. This game is very like Yakuza. So when I played Yakuza Like a Dragon, one thing that I said is that you can see where the budget of the game went. Some cutscenes, absolutely amazing pre-rendered cutscenes. Other conversations, there's no voice acting and really stiff animations. And Final Fantasy VII Remake is the exact same. Yes, there are certain times when you're like, oh, that cutscene didn't look good, or that character model doesn't look great, but the overall package of how they fleshed out Midgar, made it into a living, breathing city, but then also delivered a story that is impactful with characters that absolutely everybody loves, and their portrayal and their voice acting. Yes, it's extremely campy. Like, I always go back to that Barrett scene in the lift when he's like, yeah, the planet is dying, and he's doing all these mad hand gestures, and it's just completely campy, but it's so entertaining. And a lot of it is on the nose. It's similar to Yakuza, where like they do all these like Aerith does a weird sort of like, it zooms in on her face, it's just this weird like animation. It's just like, that looks so weird, but it just works. And I remember I actually listened to my Final Fantasy VII Remake review back in 2020, and I said, like, surely we don't see the end of this trilogy till 2030 at the earliest. But back then, again, I didn't realize this game was like Yakuza in how it was built and how it was made. And I think that formula of how Yakuza is built and how Final Fantasy VII Remake was built is the reason why we are getting Rebirth only 4 years after. Yes, there's a lot of this stuff built up. Like, they already have Cloud and Barrett and Tifa and Aerith and all this working together, and they understand, they have their mechanics, they have all their animations and all this stuff, and they have all the systems built. So all they need to do is just build a world and quests. Obviously, still a massive undertaking, but a lot of the foundation is there. But because of how this game is structured, because, yes, you have those absolutely massive blockbuster cutscenes that are just completely over the top, extremely entertaining and super high budget. But then also you have the smaller moments where you're talking to some random NPC. And I think those moments with the random NPCs kind of work to flesh out the world almost, where Midgar feels like a real place. Like when the plate blows up and you see the reaction of all the citizens of Midgar. And that just helps flesh out the world. And that might sound a bit hypocritical, considering in my Final Fantasy XVI review, I said that the problem with the game is that it is all this massive flash, super high budget for like 30 minutes, and then the next 2.5 hours is just boring filler with completely useless exposition and completely like different production values. I think the main difference here is that when you're in those slower moments, like let's take when Cloud falls into the church, meets Aerith, you do the boss fight, you escape, and you're just exploring the rooftops, and you're just going back to the Sector 5 slums. But it's fleshed out with these, you know, little character moments where, yeah, they might seem boring to some people, but if you have a genuine love for these characters, they just work as great moments to flesh them out. Give them, you know, either some cheesy, funny dialogue that's entertaining, or B, you get like a small bit of character development. You know, when you're turning off the lamps and Barrett is afraid of heights, and you're like, this is some big macho man that's trying to save the planet, but he's afraid of heights. Or you see Aerith be like apprehensive about jumping over the gaps and stuff. And it's just those little things that make them moments way better. And then I think the main difference between this and Final Fantasy XVI is that the systems behind all of this are just absolutely fantastic. I genuinely believe this is one of, if not the best RPG combat systems I have ever played in a game. Because for years, Square have been struggling. They tried a full action combat system in Final Fantasy XV, and that game is just completely useless. All you do is hold square. It's a terrible combat system. And then you go to games like Final Fantasy XII, which has this like MMO light kind of combat system, which I actually really enjoyed. But when it came to the action stuff, they've never fully managed to flesh it out and make it feel fun. Because if you go to stuff like Trials of Mana or one of them, it's like, it's flashy, but it's extremely shallow and extremely boring, and there's not much depth to it. But then when you go to Final Fantasy VII Remake, they clearly went in with a mantra of, okay, how do we make the Final Fantasy VII original combat, but bring it into a modern era and have action systems to it? And they just melded it absolutely perfectly. Every single character controls differently, which is a massive thing, because when you play Tifa, she's almost like a fighting character. When you play Barrett, who was probably like the most annoying one, he's a ranged character. Cloud, obviously with the big buster sword, hits like a truck. Aerith is like this magic wielding off in the distance, throwing crap at people. And of course you can't forget Yuffie, because that DLC is fantastic. Yuffie, I cannot wait to play as Yuffie in the new game. But they took the essence of the original Final Fantasy VII combat and just fleshed it out, and just, they still kept the ATB system, but they melded it into this action combat where the whole game is about building up your ATB bar so that you can use spells and abilities. And when you're in hard mode, you really, really have to think about everything, especially in the boss fights, because every single one of them is like a proper battle where you have to figure out, oh, what can I do on this attack? Should I block? Should I dodge? When he's in this state, what should I do? Should I use this ability here, or should I save my ATB? Or should I use Chakra, or should I use Cura, Courage, or Curaga, or whatever? Because your resources are extremely finite, because you cannot use any items, you can't use healing potions, you can't use ether. So whatever MP you have going into that battle is exactly the only amount of MP that you can use in the battle. So you're really just constantly thinking about it. And the fact that this game is so fun in hard mode and not like a cheesy, boring slog just shows that they really put a lot of time into the combat system. And it literally took me like 30 minutes to realize, like, I absolutely adore this combat system. And I just can't wait to see what all the other characters in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are like, because it's going to be seriously just, oh, I am so excited. And I know this is me gushing about the game. And I know I didn't get to Chapter 9, which I believe is where the pacing kind of grinds down a bit. And Chapter 14 as well. Both of them have a lot of side quests. Now, you don't have to choose to do them, but apparently that's where the pacing kind of grinds down a bit. And the thing is that every single JRPG has that moment. And it all depends on how high quality the rest of the game is to see if you can get past that stuff. So if we take Yakuza Like a Dragon, for example, I think that game is my favorite turn-based JRPG ever. And that chapter where you have to grind, where it's like you hit a wall, really annoying. Like, it's super, super annoying because it grinds the pacing down. But because the rest of the game is so good, I can overlook it. And I think, now I haven't actually played the chapters because, again, I'm only one man. I don't have unlimited time, unfortunately. I would have loved to do a full replay of this, but I just can't find the time. But I think the rest of this game is so high quality that even if the pacing grinds down, I would still love it. Because, again, the systems behind it. Upgrading your weapons, upgrading your materia, equipping different characters with different materia, finding new weapons, leveling up your weapon so that you unlock its ability so that you can use it. There's just so much going on, and I just love the materia system. And the fact that the materia reflects on your weapons is just so, like, it's just a little detail, like how Cloud's Buster Sword has 2 materia in it, or how, like, Tifa's Gauntlet will have a couple of materia in it. It's just cool. And there's something about the world of Final Fantasy VII that is just so compelling. Firstly, Midgar's is a cool city of, like, a slum that's underneath a plate, and then the sun is covered, and then all the rich people live on top. It's just a cool idea. And then I just can't wait to get out into the world and explore all of these locations from the original game in Rebirth. I am extremely excited for Rebirth. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm so glad that I went back to play it because I genuinely cannot put the game down. If I wasn't making a video on this, I would have just played it all day, but, you know, videos need to be edited and uploaded and all that, so I just have to kind of take that. But I might go back and play the Yuffie DLC because that's only short, and I just kind of want to get reacquainted with playing as Yuffie as well. But yeah, I'm just so happy that Rebirth is coming out. I have one concern, I don't know, now judging by the Metacritic score, I haven't seen any reviews because I want to review Rebirth myself, and I don't want to have my opinion, you know, affected by anything else. But I want to voice one concern. When Square Enix do open worlds, they don't do them well. I don't think they ever really have done them well. I think Final Fantasy XII was probably the biggest game with a wide... It's not open world, it's, you know, instance area, but the areas are big because it's like an MMO-like. And I think that's what I want from Rebirth. Again, I don't know what Rebirth is. I don't know if it's fully open world, if it's smaller area or bigger areas that connect into each other. But every single time Square tried to do open worlds, like... But you take it back to Forspoken, and while the open world was kind of fun, it just kind of felt a bit useless. And I think that's the exact problem that Final Fantasy 15 had, is that when Final Fantasy 15 was linear, it was actually really good. When it's open world, it was actually really bad. And yeah, that's my only concern, is that maybe it doesn't really pan out in the open world and it kind of feels a bit useless and would have been better if it was linear. But again, that's something I'll have to wait and see. That's my only, real concern about it. All I can say is we spend a lot of time talking about how bad games are, or how this game sucks, or I'm not excited for this game. But I think there are times when, even as a critic or reviewer, if you want to put me in that bracket, which I guess I am, I mean, I do review games, so I am, but like, there's times when you just kind of have to enjoy the moment where Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming out. And when Remake came out, it was a special time. The music was fantastic. The game itself is just so good. And it's so nostalgic. And the fact that we are about to experience Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a game that is my most anticipated game of the year, and also, hopefully, judged by the Metacritic, is also going to be an absolute masterpiece. I don't know. It's kind of... Sometimes have to sit down and just be like, this is exciting. This is fun. I'm going to have a good time. Yes, I might have critiques because I did watch my Final Fantasy VII Remake review, if you want to put it in that. It wasn't really a review. This was probably my 6th video. I was basically just gushing about the game, and I'm gushing about it here. But like, you can see that this game does have some issues. It definitely does. There's nowhere. It's not perfect, but it's still like an amazing game. As I say, I believe how games... All games have bad parts. Every single game does. But it's how well does all the good parts of the game outshine the bad parts of the game. That's how I look at when I'm reviewing a game. Is that you're always going to have issues, but at the end of the day, if something brings you genuine joy and is high quality, and it doesn't even need to be high quality, it just needs to resonate with you on a personal level, then if all them good parts can make you overlook the bad parts, then it's a good game in my eyes. That's how I look at it. You might have a different opinion, but that's how I look at it. So yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an amazing game, and I hope Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is even better. And I also hope Final Fantasy VII re something, they're gonna put, there has to be another RE word, is gonna be even better. So have to wait and see. I appreciate everybody watching. The game is out in like 2 or 3 days. I will be getting it on launch. I will be sweating it as much as possible to get a review done, so please stick around for that. It's going to be a long, big boy review. And one more thing, I believe the story of this game, of Remake and Rebirth, is kind of a hard one to critique. A, because it's very convoluted. It is. Like I watched Easy Allies review spoiler cast thing that they did back in the day of Remake, and they had Maximilian do it on, and he's like a Final Fantasy VII nut, and all of the theories. Like, I understand the whispers, I understand their purpose, I understand that maybe Sephiroth understands what's going on. I also understand that maybe Aerith also understands what's going on, and she can see in the future. Cloud is obviously having like the visions where he can see the future. So there's a lot of crap going on, but then there's other theories that like are just way over my head, way above my pay grade, and I'm not intelligent enough to understand. So I think these sorts of trilogies, when they're very clearly set up like that, they're hard to critique from a story standpoint until they're finished. Yes, you can critique the individual moments, but maybe there will be certain moments maybe in the future, I'm like, I didn't actually like that in Remake. And then when you get to re-intermission or whatever you want to call it, the third one, you're like, oh, that's big. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So yes, thank you everybody for watching. Final Fantasy VII Remake, amazing game. Play it. Play Rebirth maybe, I don't know. It might be bad, but I don't think it will be. Yeah, thank you. Subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Everything. Whatever you want to do. I'm not your dad. Goodbye.